LaxFactor podcast. What is up, college lacrosse fans? We are back for season 3 of the LaxFactor Lacrosse podcast. It is October. That means fall ball is popping up. That means the writers in the lacrosse world are putting out a bunch of good, thirsty for college lacrosse content, and we're going to talk about that. Inside Lacrosse actually put out an article. It was more of a slideshow called 10 Questions for Fall Ball. By the way, I hate slideshow. I know they're trying to get their clicks up and everything like that, but there's nothing worse than a slideshow article. I absolutely think that they should just stack that crap for us. Anyway, before I dive into it and answer these 10 questions for fall ball, and we're going to talk about Maryland's new number 1 right at the top of all of that. As always, you can be sure to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, go to anchor.fm/LaxFactor if you're an audio listener, or anywhere where you can find podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, you name it, we're there. And as always, you can go to LaxFactor.com to get yourself some swag. And if you're an audio listener, go to youtube.com/LaxFactor and you can watch the video version. And it looks like we are about to put a version out on another video platform, although I'm still holding off the announcement until it's official, but it is super close to being official now. So we will actually have 2 places where you can and I'm not talking like Instagram. We throw this whole thing up on Instagram and people barely watch it there because Instagram's not really a long form video place, but we actually have a new location to host a video podcast, and it's non-political. It's not one of those weird, hey, we're ditching YouTube for a different place. It's just an additional place people will be able to watch the podcast, and they'll actually be able to watch and listen at the same time, depending. I don't know if that tips it off, but anyway, let's get into this here. 10 questions for fall ball as posed by Inside Lacrosse. I'll put a link here in the description so you can get to that article. I'll probably forget to do that, but just know you can go to Inside Lacrosse and find their slideshow. So the first part I want to talk about here, though, is it's tied to how will the Terps replace Jared Bernhardt? And part of the question there is who's going to end up wearing the new number 1. So I saw this news pop as if there were people that were actually surprised that the new number 1 at Maryland is going to be Logan Wisnauskas. That was an absolute no-brainer. I had said back when it didn't look like Bernhardt was coming back that Wisnauskas was the only person that they could potentially give that jersey number 2. And, you know, that's what they ended up doing here now that Bernhardt came back and now that he's gone. Don't get it twisted. Logan Wisnauskas is going to be a very solid number 1. Now you see when teams pass down these numbers, and you saw the mockery that number 22 became, not because the players that wore it in the later years weren't worthy of putting that number on, because it is just a number after all, but because the expectations get too high and people forget that you're just dealing with a player on the team. And like with someone like Jordan Evans, who wouldn't have given their left leg, maybe not their left leg, but their pinky toe, to have the career that he ended up having at Syracuse. I mean, he was a solid lacrosse player for easily 2 of the 4 years, and by his senior year, he was one of their best players, and he was an important piece of that very good team. So I think that too much is often put on the numbers, even by myself at times. But in terms of Logan Wisnauskas wearing the number 1 for Maryland, I always find a way to bring things back to Cuse, in case you haven't noticed. The dude is going to hold down that fort for sure. He can do a bit of everything. And at times in 2019 and 2020, early on before the 2020 season got shit canned, you wouldn't have been a crazy person for trying to make the argument that Logan Wisnauskas was Maryland's best offensive threat. Now, that came at a time when Bernhardt was not as crazy as he was and as aggressive as he was this year. I think in his case, he left lacrosse for a little while, thought that was it, and then got a chance to come back and play again. And I think that showed in his on-field demeanor. He came out and played all season like a man on a mission. So there was no question who Maryland's best player was. And I, if you had asked me who's Maryland's best player, I would have given it to Jared Bernhardt. But Logan Wisnauskas was right behind him. And he'd oftentimes would get overshadowed by Bernhardt because as part of their scheme, Bernhardt's the main dodger. Bernhardt demanded carries, not demanded carries himself, but as part of the scheme, Bernhardt got carries. And Wisnauskas oftentimes would end up playing like that second dodger or off-ball sniper, which he does both of those jobs very well. But he can dodge. He can go to the rack. He can dodge. He can finish with the best of them. He can play off ball. The dude truly has the total package. And like I said, in 2019 and 2020, there were people in the Maryland camp that liked what Wisnauskas did a little bit better than what Bernhardt did. It was only 2021 that there was no question that Bernhardt was the man, but Wisnauskas was right there beside him. Let's look at his stats, because Wisnauskas, since transferring from Syracuse, which I would have loved to see this kid play for Syracuse, since transferring away from Syracuse, 2018, kid goes 35-15 in his freshman year, 50 points, 40% shooting, 68% of those on cage. Now, a lot of times when dudes put up 50-plus points, you'll end up seeing them get a little bit more attention the following year, and their shooting percentage dip. Not so with Wisnauskas, thanks partly to Bernhardt being crazy and them having to defend Bernhardt so hard. 2019, 44 goals, 35 assists, 79 points. He puts up 29 more points in that season, and he increased his shooting percentage as part of that stretch, 41%, 53% on cage. His on-cage percentage went down drastically, but his shooting percentage went up by 1 point. And then we're going to skip the 2020 season. He was on pace to tear it up again. That was the season where I thought, man, this kid looks like he might be their best player now. Like he might even eclipse Bernhardt in that 2020 season. That season doesn't happen. Bernhardt ends up coming back after us all thinking he might not. And 2021, Bernhardt tore it up. Best player in the country, in the world, in college lacrosse at that point. But Wisnauskas, not to be outdone. Well, he was outdone, but not to be ignored. 41 goals, 31 helpers, 72 points, 39% shooting with a 63% shooting, 63% of those shots coming on cage. So he is not a replacement for Bernhardt. What Bernhardt did in 2021 is going to be very difficult to replicate. So I'm not trying to say that Wisnauskas is going to Maryland's not going to skip a beat without Bernhardt. They're going to have to figure some things out offensively, because Wisnauskas is not the Dodger that Bernhardt is, but Wisnauskas is every bit the finisher that Bernhardt is. And to pretend that Maryland doesn't have other guys that can kind of carry the rock a little bit more and dodge a little bit more to help continue to create for Wisnauskas, that you'd be naive to think that. I mean, I think Maltz is going to end up taking over as the primary off-ball guy. And once again, we're getting into that point of the season where I'm not even sure who's still on campus and who's not, but I'm almost positive Maltz is still there. So I think he'll end up taking over as the primary off-ball guy. And I think he did that a little bit more last year. He was insanely efficient off-ball. He's going to be able to do that. So they're not going to lose anything in terms of off-ball play by making Wisnauskas a little bit more of the focus of the initializing aspects of the offense. But still, Logan, he can make do. He can dodge. He can get to the rack. I've already rolled some highlights, I'm sure, where he had that one sick one where he was coming up the left side, up the alley, tight to the crease, and was falling down and stuck it high. I mean, the dude can score highlight reel goals. He can score regular bangers. He can, beast one in from outside. That he has a little bit of everything. So you Maryland fans are not going to be the least bit upset about having Wisnauskas put on that number one. And I know you guys already know that. It's the rest of the lacrosse world that might not realize that Wisnauskas is the real deal. And I think he'll be a legitimate Tewaaraton candidate through the season here. He's, like I said, Bernhardt's got much of the media attention because he deserved it. Wisnauskas is every bit of deserving of that attention now that he's going to be that new number one. It's a shame he only gets to wear it 1 year, I think, but still, who cares? The dude's filthy. So that's how they're going to replace Bernhardt. They're going to replace Bernhardt by giving Wisnauskas the number one. They're going to try to replace Bernhardt, I should say that way. They're going to try to replace Bernhardt by letting Bubba Fairman carry the ball a little bit more, because Fairman's he's a pretty filthy midfielder, and he's got a dope name on top of it. And then overall, you got Maltz stepping in, and Maryland's just lock and load. They're ready to go. They've got dudes. They got midfielders for days that can step in and play decent roles and draw eyeballs and bump the ball down to attack, allowing Wisnauskas to do his filthy stuff. So it's going to be fine here. Another question they posed: how do the Ivies respond? Other than who gives a shit that, because the Ivies are, the people who run the Ivies are a bunch of douchebags. I think they're going to be okay. I think the Ivy lacrosse teams are going to be okay. I think you're going to naturally see they've bled a little bit of talent here, with I'm going to talk about Rutgers here a little bit. And they stole an Ivy midfielder / attackman. And I think the Ivies bled talent, and I think that's going to show a little bit. I don't think there's going to be an Ivy that's going to come out and make a run to the Final Four unless they really put something together. I think that two things you're going to notice with the Ivies: a little bit less baller talent, although it's still going to be there. It's just going to be new guys that are stepping up trying to take the reins. And I think they're just going to be rusty. They're going to figure it out. They're going to win games. There's going to be an Ivy or two that will make the tournament. I think at least one Ivy's making the tournament, and I wouldn't be the least bit surprised to still see two Ivy League teams make the tournament, because there's still they have lacrosse pedigree. They play smart lacrosse. They should, because they're the Ivy Leagues. But a lot of those Ivy Leagues play really weirdly blue collar tough lacrosse. Yale, it doesn't get much like Yale and Virginia in terms of their defensive style of plays, beat you up, be all over the field. They play a very blue collar, in your face, beat you up, talk a lot of trash type lacrosse. Some of the Ivies do. So they're going to be fine. They're going to be fine. I think that they won't be quite what they were, but give them 2 years and they'll be right back to rolling again. I think that they just have to figure out who the new guys carrying the rock is going to be for each of them. Carrying the torch, so to speak, will be for each of them, as some of them bled talent and lost guys to graduation and crap like that. So a lot of them are going to be young in terms of guys with legitimate experience, but we'll see as the rosters come out and as they start playing in the end. But I predict we still end up with 2 Ivies making the tournament, but obviously one of them is going to make the tournament by, just how it works because of the automatic qualifiers. How will Rutgers replace their attack? That was a great question that they had posed there. I actually liked their answers and I agreed with them. Charlambides, Mullins, and Kirst all graduate. That's going to hurt. That is going to hurt badly. I don't care who you put in their place. That was a good trio of attackmen that clicked. They played well together. So they picked up some transfers, but to pretend that they're going to be able to plug anybody in and have that be equaled the success they had last year, at least on the offensive side of the ball, to have that be equaled, not going to happen. The transfers that will help: Ronan Jacoby, Wesleyan transfer. He had 22 goals, 5 helpers in a short season for Wesleyan last year. They must have played a limited schedule. 2021 for Wesleyan, he had 22 goals, 5 helpers over 5 games. So, that's pretty solid. 4.4 goals and 1 assist per game, 5.4 points per game for those poor at math overall across those 5 games. So he'll help, but he's not going to light the world on fire by any means. Now, Mitch Bartolo from Penn transfer, in his last full season with Penn, which was 2019, Bartolo put up 17 goals and 7 assists. He's a big pickup for sure for Rutgers, a heady vet, but not Kirst. He's not going to be that transfer that comes in and does what Kirst did, although he probably put up 30, 40 points, I would imagine here. Brian Cameron, that's one I'm excited about for them. UNC transfer, 16 goals, 1 helper for UNC last year. Quality depth for UNC last year on the offensive side of the field that was loaded. And he got a bunch of burn, but the kicker with UNC was just that, they had 3-4 guys put up most of the points, and then all the guys below were just solid finishers beyond that. So Cameron, he's going to help. But once again, that trio does not equal Charlambides, Mullins, and Kirst. Those guys were all killers. And I think Rutgers is still going to be good. I think Rutgers is still going to hold down the number 2, 3, 4 spot. I think they're still going to be top 4 in the Big Ten. And I believe they said that Kirst was coming back to play in cage. The goalie Kirst, whatever he was. Connor was what? Connor and Colin? Connor Kirst is the one that graduated, was the attack, I believe, and Colin Kirst, I think, is a goalie. From what I read, I thought it made it look like he might be able to come back for his senior season. So if that's the case, that helps him on the defensive side of the ball a little bit. Rutgers was much improved on defense last year. They actually played pretty tough defense, and they had an offensive firepower to go with it. But I think you're going to see Rutgers be down a little bit. I think they'll still probably win 7 or 8 games. They're still going to threaten for a spot in the NCAA tournament, but I think it's going to go back to being that Rutgers, like, biting their nails. Are we getting in or are we not type deal come tournament selection time. We already talked about Wisnauskas. That was part of the how's Maryland going to replace Bernhardt. Now, who's on the Tewaaraton list? I think I talked about this a little bit in my 5 attackmen that I'm excited to see come back episode that I just threw out there last week. Now I really mean it. Now that the 3rd season has started and we're in October, we're going to start pumping these out every week again. Pat Kavanaugh, he's one of my favorites. Chris Gray is obviously probably the odds-on favorite. The big money's going with Chris Gray, or the smart money, I should say, is going with Chris Gray. The degenerate gambling money, for me, would go to Pat Kavanaugh. Kavanaugh, though, look out for him, because he's as exciting as Gray, maybe more exciting than Gray, because I think he's got a little bit more swag than Gray has. Gray is exciting and plays really fun lacrosse, but his celebrations aren't the greatest. He's a little bit vanilla, whereas a Kavanaugh, he's got those rough edges that you like in a player. He's got that shit-talking thing going for him, I believe. So I think Pat Kavanaugh is one of my favorites. Asher Nolting, I think you have to put him in there. I didn't see them mention Nolting in the inside lacrosse side of it, but I'm pretty damn sure he's coming back. And beyond Gray and Kavanaugh, I would say Nolting is your third guy, or at least in my opinion, the third guy right there on that list. He's a beast, killer stick skills, high IQ, high risk, high reward kind of guy, which leads him to turn the ball over a lot. But I've been talking about his turnovers the last 2 seasons. Last year, he turned the ball over less than he had the previous 2 years in terms of average turnovers per game, even with all of the attention that he was getting every time he touched the ball. So I think he's got a chance. Jack Hanna was someone they mentioned, Jungle Jack Hanna from Denver. He could have a huge breakout season, and he's going to need to, because Denver lost a lot of talent to graduation. Lost 2 of those 3 starting attackmen in terms of Jackson Morrill and what's his nuts, the Walker up there on the left side. I think Nakai Montgomery could end up threatening a little bit. You don't see a lot of midfielders, so I don't think Hanna and Montgomery are going to be those guys. But depending on what kind of numbers they put up, they could be, and both of them are going to be called upon to put some numbers up for their teams. So I like Montgomery at least being a candidate through the season. Don't front on Connor Schellenberger. He's only going to be a sophomore, but Schellenberger, by the end of the season, Schellenberger was one of the top. He was playing at least like one of the top 5 guys in the fucking sport at that point. Schellenberger's playoff run was incredible. He didn't win that tournament for Virginia by any means, but without the contribution that he put up and without him specifically playing at that high a level, Virginia does not repeat as the national championship. So don't front on Connor Schellenberger, even though he's young. The Tewaaraton does not typically go to young guys. I want to say Mike Powell is one of the youngest guys to win it. I want to say that possibly I don't know. I think Powell might be the youngest guy to win it. I think he won it as a sophomore, didn't win it as a junior, and then won it again as a senior. So we'll see. I think Thompson might have won it as a junior. He might have won it as a junior and a senior, but Thompson might have even won it as a sophomore and a senior. I'm not sure. Moral of the story that Schellenberger is probably going to make the list through the season, and don't be surprised if he just runs roughshod all over NCAA lacrosse here in 2022. Sisselberger, they mentioned him. He won't win it, face-off guy, but he's a dominant face-off guy, so I think he has to. They always have a face-off guy or 2 on the watch list, so I think Sisselberger has to be on there. Will Bowen on the defensive side, ditching UNC for Georgetown. Georgetown needs him, so he's going to be front and center within that Georgetown defense, as they lost, I think, Gibson Smith, they lost to graduation. That's a big one. So Bowen, I think, he'll be on the list. He might even make finalist or whatnot, depending on the season he has. That's a huge pickup for Georgetown, by the way, at the perfect time. That's going to hurt UNC, though. You lose your best defender to Georgetown, who now picks up a great defender, and they were already a solid defensive team. I think the early favorite for the win, hands down, Chris Gray. But watch Notre Dame. I feel like Notre Dame could end up winning the ACC. I think Notre Dame's, I don't even know if I'd call them a sleeper. You figure Duke lost a bunch of talent. UVA, North Carolina lost a considerable amount of talent. Syracuse loses a considerable amount of talent. So I like Notre Dame for being like the number 1 or 2 team. I think Virginia, for me, is still probably the favorite in the ACC, but I think Notre Dame, I think it's probably Virginia as the favorite and then everyone right below them. But I like Notre Dame and their shot at being the number 2 team, maybe even the winner of the ACC this year. So I like the chance that Kavanaugh has, even though, once again, younger guy. I think eligibility-wise, he's going to be considered a sophomore because I think the COVID season was his freshman year, but he's technically a junior. So the kid's a vet in terms of his mentality and even experience to a degree, but he's underaged in terms of the class that he plays within. Another good question. What's the Cuse defense going to look like? Man, tough call. Anytime you have a new defensive coordinator, you could say that could cause some problems, especially early on in the season. You offset that worry with the fact that the guy that you brought in is a legend, living Hall of Famer in Dave Petramala. So you'd like to think that his experience will help ease a little bit of that transition issues you might have in trying to learn the new scheme, because it does sound like he's trying to put a scheme in based on the personnel that he has available to him right now. So that's the upside in terms of the coaching change aspect of it. But Rogers was not a chump of a defensive coach. I mean, Leland Rogers was an excellent defensive coach as well. And even with him, they weren't able to put it together. And I think it was because they just didn't have enough depth of talent, enough quality defensive talent all the way through. They had their top 2 or 3 guys. They always had a solid D-mid, a solid pole, and a solid long pole, LSM. But they didn't have 3, a crazy solid, they had the, like an All-American caliber pole, but then two guys that weren't quite ready to fill that void behind him. So I don't know. I think it could be rough. I think that they're going to be a little bit inexperienced. They lost some D-mid talent, and I'm not sure that the D-mid talent they have is going to be good enough to get them over that hump. So I think a lot of it's going to come down to scheming and play. I mean, you have Kennedy back, so that's good, but you got a new goalie. So I think that the defense is going to be the big question mark for the Cuse. I think offensively, you're going to see Cuse do excellent, amazing things under Gary Gait with the talent they have on attack and defense. I think or on attack and midfield. I think it's going to be the defensive side that we're all wondering about, but I like our chances with Petro as our coach. Next question. Is UVA the preseason number one? Yes. The national champ almost always has to be the preseason number one. If you have to go that way, I think it's stupid not to. The team that won it all, especially the team that won it all that's bringing back a lot of solid pieces. They have Peyton Cormier coming back. He'll get full-time at attack on that left side with Schellenberger. They're going to be one of the best 1-2 punches in terms of attack duos in the country. Schellenberger and Cormier will be. And I mean, listen, they played well last year, but they both shifted between midfield and attack, because UVA was so loaded offensively. So yes, UVA lost some dudes last year, but bringing these two back is huge, and these two are the types of guys that will fill a void. I believe these two guys were probably offensively their best two players overall. I think that Cormier was their best off-ball guy. He could do a little bit of dodging, sniping. He could... I'm hearing birds here, so I must have a cat in the other room playing. So yeah, I think that Cormier, was their best finisher last year, and I think that Schellenberger in the end proved he was their best dodger last year. So they bring their best finisher and their best dodger back, two of their top point getters. So they're the number one. Defensively is where you're going to have some questions here and there, but their style of play defensively is it makes up for a lack of great ball stoppers with getting out and getting aggressive, playing help defense, pressuring people, running up and down the field. So I think that UVA I think they should be the number one team. And at this point, they're right now my favorite for maybe winning it all again. I haven't gone through all the teams yet and looked at all the rosters and looked at who's coming back completely yet. But man, UVA is still one of my favorites to make the Final Four again, because I think that highly of Schellenberger and Cormier and everything that they're doing down there. And that's coming from a diehard Cuse fan, people. And Petey LaSala. I forgot to mention they got Petey LaSala coming back. Petey fucking LaSala. So what are you going to do here? Do I have my Petey fucking LaSala shirt that we had printed up here somewhere? I think it's upstairs because I was wearing it. But we do have our Petey fucking LaSala t-shirts. I'll have to bring it out here and show it in the next episode because I can't find it. Now I almost want to get up and get it, but I'm not going to do that. So yeah, Petey fucking LaSala is back too, baby. So don't front on that. They're going to get the ball, win the ball, score goals, and transition off faceoffs as well. Who's the biggest transfer? That's the next question they asked. I think almost hands down it's Will Bowen. Georgetown, they lose some talent. They replace it with Bowen. Rutgers did well in the transfer portal, but they didn't get anybody at Bowen's level. With the loss of some serious offensive weapons on Georgetown side, they need Bowen to play some big defense. So not only is Bowen, I think, the biggest name that changed positions here, but Bowen's also going to be immediately called upon to anchor that defense, and it's going to be a good scheme for him to run within. So even if you make the argument that there was some other big high-profile names or some crap like that, I still think that Will Bowen's the biggest one. Oh my gosh, man! I hope you can't hear it. Let me be quiet. Okay, I don't think you're going to be able to hear that bird thing, but I have a cat just raging on a bird toy, and it's going off in the other room here. Who will surprise as a mid-major? They mentioned in their article Bryant, and I agree, man. But with Bryant, I think there was a little bit of lightning in a bottle, a little bit of playing down. They did play really tough in that first-round loss, but I think that their problem is just going to be you got to have that lightning in a bottle, and it's tough for a team like that to come up with that 2 years in a row. I think that they'll probably make the tournament again and get out of their conference, but I don't know that they're going to be I don't know that that's a surprise to me. I think once again, not a surprise. I think High Point is going to be another mid-major that's going to be good again because they have probably of all the mid-major teams, High Point has the best player in Asher Nolting of all of the mid-major teams. So I like them. I like Richmond again. So that's a tough one. The mid-majors are always tough to call too because the mid-majors are always good for having one or two guys on their roster surprise, like Kevin Rogers last year for High Point. Like what a pickup he was. And it's like you don't know who's going to be the big cat at their midfield, and then Rogers comes in, cuts his hair, makes himself about a pound lighter and scores a bunch of goals, and then played really well at the PLL level. So I like High Point, I like Richmond, but it's really tough to call, I think, overall, who's going to be good within the mid-major side of it until you start seeing early season who's going to become the new pimp daddy of the mid-majors. And right now, I think Asher Nolting is that for High Point. Next question. How does Brennan O'Neill take over for Duke? He's going to take over just fine, I think. I think Duke lost a lot, but they're still going to be a threat in the ACC and be a threat to make the Final Four just because their whole lock and reload concept works really well for them. I think O'Neill's going to tear it up, though. I think he's good for 50-plus points. Could be 60-plus. I hope we see a feed the beast mentality, which you don't often see in Durham, but I hope that we end up seeing that with O'Neill because the kid can dodge, can finish off ball, so you do not have to feed him all the time. He's not that guy who's going to be like a Bernhardt or who's going to be like a Grant Ament where they're going to get the ball all the time and dodge at least once or twice on every possession. He doesn't need to do that, but as long as he's getting to the rack and getting looks every other possession or so, that will allow Duke to do their thing and get everybody else involved while allowing O'Neill to do his thing as well because he's just as deadly off ball as he's going to be with the ball here. And now one thing I will say with O'Neill, Sowers did turn a lot of heads. So a lot of attention was paid to Sowers and O'Neill got to kind of camp on that left side. O'Neill got to be the beneficiary of a lot of two dodges off setup dodges or primary dodges, meaning someone else went to the rack, kind of maybe drew a slide, maybe didn't even draw a slide, but the defense has to kind of shift a little bit to that. Then you bang the ball twice and O'Neill's on the backside, catching it from X and running hard into the middle of the field with very little help before the defense would get a chance to fully adjust and get the help ready. So I think that helped him a little bit last year, but he doesn't need that. He's not the kind of dude like where I would say Wisnauskas might be a little bit more effective as a two dodger. I think O'Neill overall is going to be effective as a primary dodger or a two dodger. The dude just knows how to get to the rack. He has a nose, probably one of the best finishers by the end of his career that we'll see overall in terms of being able to do it all. The kid does a little bit of everything, but he does a little bit of everything at a very high level. One thing to watch. He scored the Rock at a 36.6% clip last year while putting 64.2 of his shots on cage. 45 goals, 10 assists with a 36.6% shooting percentage. That's going to drop. I think what they're going to ask him to do this upcoming season is probably going to result in his shooting percentage probably drop into the area of 30. If he keeps his shooting percentage above 33, that is a huge accomplishment for him. I think you're going to see his shooting percentage dip to 30, but I think with the increased looks and touches overall, you're still going to see him put up 50, 60-plus points. He could put up more than that. It just depends on what Duke ends up trying to do offensively. Duke, you might find Duke in a situation where they need him to do even more, and the kid could put up 80 points. So things to watch, but you will see guys that were kind of the two options of the two dodger, the second option offensively when they get asked to become the number one option. One of the main things you end up seeing is their shooting percentage drop. That sometimes happens just as a matter of a guy having a breakout season and you realizing, hey, we got to pay attention to this guy. But with O'Neill, there are no surprises. Day one, teams are going to be game planning for him. So I expect at least early on that shooting percentage will take a dip against any of the good teams that he plays anyway. Last question here. I've been rambling for a while. How will Johns Hopkins improve with a full fall? They won't. I've been getting into the crypto here a lot lately. So I've been, we're talking about pumps and dumps and all sorts of things like that. Now, I'm not going to be bullish as we would say in the stock market or the crypto world. I'm not going to be bullish on Johns Hopkins until they give us reason to be. If you're looking at their chart, if we're going to continue on with this stupid analogy that my wife wants to choke me for because all I talk about these days is crypto. If you're looking at his chart or the Johns Hopkins chart, there's not a lot to be all that optimistic about. Now, I'm not saying that they're going to suck. I mean, I think Hopkins is still going to be a top 4 in the big. Hopkins could come out and surprise having that fall under their belt, but I don't think that the lack of a fall ball last year was Hopkins' biggest problem. I think Hopkins' biggest problem last year was a lack of quality of depth, a lack of talent, a lack of Joey Epstein panning out. Joey Epstein, after his freshman season, I was like, this dude is going to be the best attackman in college lacrosse for the next 3 years. And whether it's due to injury or other factors, I don't know, but he's barely been one of the 10 best attackmen in the country. I still have hope that he could turn that around and the kid could end up being a Tewaaraton candidate this season. He's that good. And if the reason for some of his lack of success was due to injury and him still trying to adjust and get back from that, then maybe he will have a breakout season here. But I think that the big problem with Hopkins is something that you saw with Syracuse too. When the guy who's supposed to carry the franchise isn't playing up to that level, you're gonna have some down years, and that's what happened with Syracuse, where a couple of their recruits that were supposed to be, they were top recruits in the country. You get a number 1 to you get a top 10 kid. You figure that kid's going to be one of the best players in the country for 4 years, and when they don't pan out, that hurts you badly. So I think that Hopkins is dealing with defensive issues, inconsistent play at the goal. In cage, I think their midfielders have been decent. I think they've had a couple of guys who have overachieved. Their problem is having the guy that needed to achieve at the right level hasn't. So I think that they could improve if we see a really solid Epstein and we see some of these guys fill the holes that they need to fill. But I just am not bullish on them yet because they have to prove to us that there's going to be reason to be. And we're not going to know that until we see them play. Fall ball isn't going to tell us shit, to be truthful. It will with younger coaches. Older coaches, they don't even give a shit if they get a win. They just want to get guys reps and see what they've got and work their systems and crap like that. So I don't know. I don't think it's going to. I don't think fall ball is going to help them much. I think that what's going to help them is a healthy, highly aggressive Joey Epstein, and then some other guys just maybe finding a keeper that's solid, that's going to play a full season without risking being benched or something like that. They've had a lot of instability in goal in Baltimore here for Hopkins. So that's it. I have rambled. I have talked. I am back. Season 3, episode 174 is now complete. I think we're going to rock Saturdays until the season starts. And then once the season starts, we'll start going back into Sundays again. But I think we're going to do Saturday episodes moving forward here through the fall, into the winter. We'll put out some throwaway videos here and there. Once we're ready to announce officially the new platform we're going to launch on as well, we'll end up having the video podcast on every platform. So right now, the video version of the podcast ends up on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube's the big cat. We're going to add a fourth that we're hoping is going to be just as big for growth for us as YouTube has been. And then, as always, you got the audio version, too. So be sure, like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share. Go to LaxFactor.com, get yourself some swag, support the channel. And beyond that, we're going to start messing around, doing T-shirts with players this year. A little bit of screw the NCAA. Now we can start paying players and hitting up deals with players. So we got some stuff working that we'll announce with that as well here coming up. And I'm back. I apologize for the long hiatus. We had some work shit we had to get done. But now that the season started, now that October has hit, LaxFactor is back. Lacrosse is back, which means I have to be back. Also, I'm not still huge on the PLL. I was reviewing a bunch of my PLL shows, and you could tell I am not into it. And it's not a slam on the PLL, man. The PLL is quality lacrosse. I still watch it. I have not enjoyed talking about it and prognosticating about it nearly as much as I have with college lacrosse yet, and I don't know why. I think I don't have a dog in the fight. I have a dog in the college fight in Syracuse, and these other teams have grown on me. The PLL, it doesn't seem high stakes enough. It's still, even though the quality of lacrosse is ridiculous in the PLL, it does still just not feel like it's important, and at least not to me yet. And that's not a slam on them. I'm going to eat a lot of shit from the PLL diehards for that, but that's the truth for me. They haven't won me over. I think for them to win me over, they need to get off this stupid new age. Hey, let's not have teams tied to local regions. They need to have regions. So even if we're only going to have 6, 8 teams, whatever it is, put them in a spot and then have that team host one event over the course of the year. And that event is that team's home event at least. But let's start tying these teams down to regions, even if they're only going to play in that region once all year long. So that's it. I'll be back next weekend, Saturday in the morning again here. We're going to probably mess around with a little bit of live stuff. That's if we do anything during the week. I think it's going to end up being maybe a Thursday night live session. But once again, I'm not going to make any promises other than we're going to do the long show on Saturday every weekend here through the rest of the winter. So as always, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and Hoost is out.